Great. Well, thank you so much for that excellent and discussion. I think we've all there's a lot of good takeaways there. Next up, it's my pleasure to invite Christina Gardner, who is the General Manager at Yukon Seed and Restoration. We're moving on to the themes of partnerships, and Christina is a forester who is working to bring her scientific knowledge together with Indigenous traditional knowledge. And so she's going to be talking about her partnership with the Na-cho Nyak. So please join me in welcoming Christina.
Oh, it's just arrows. Okay. Well, that's not going to stay there. Okay. So that's a pretty tough act to follow. I will not be as funny or as dynamic. But I think what my talk can do maybe is just give us a bit of a pause in between the panels and take us from some of these really big issues that we're grappling with in all of the topics we've been talking about at Geoscience, and just kind of give us a bit of a place to rest and talk about plants. And so we're just gonna talk about, breathe in and out, not ministers. We're gonna talk about plants. So I'm really happy to be here this afternoon to talk about, to contribute to this forum about First Nation engagement and community engagement and First Nation partnerships. I represent a First Nation partnership between the Na-cho Nyak Development Corporation and Corgeo. And essentially, because we are a First Nation partnership, what I'm going to talk to you about for this next few minutes is it's what it's like to be us, what it's like on a day-to-day basis to be in a partnership. Before I do that, I'd like to acknowledge that we work, live, and play here in the fabulous traditional territory of the Kwanlin First Nation and the Taan-Quechan Council. We're super happy to live and be here and grateful that you share the land with us. So who are we? Who is Yukon Seed and Restoration, and why the heck is somebody talking to you about plants in the middle of this mining conference? Well, we're a group of knowledge holders and technical specialists in restoration and remediation, and we are dedicated to translating our passion about plants into helping make things change in a good way in areas of disturbance in the Yukon. So what is it that we do? Yukon Seed and Restoration was established in 2018 as primarily a seed collection company. And we've been pivoting in the last few years as we've become more established in relation to markets and the response from our community and our owners, and are translating ourselves into a bigger picture restoration company focused with ecological restoration, but also on community engagement and education, what sort of woven through all of the pieces of the work that we do. But what does that really mean? That's a lot of words. It means that if you work with plants in your project, we want to work with you. And that's everything from soup to nuts. So it's everything from looking at your site to see what you've got and if there's anything that should be managed a little bit differently or kept a little bit safe. It also means working with you to figure out what to do once it's disturbed or you've already disturbed it. And that might mean working with you to establish trials to see if your plan, which might be a beautiful little paragraph in your restoration and closure plan, actually is going to work. And if it's going to get you to success working with the community that you're working near. So once we've worked with you with those trials, we can work with you on making planting recommendations and planting plans and connect you with fine folks who can do really big installation projects or take care of them ourselves. We can work with you to collect seeds and carry out monitoring and adaptive management programs. But woven into all the things that we do is education. We've talked a lot this morning about how important it is to have hands-on education in communities, and that's a thing that's very near and dear to our hearts, something we work on so often that it's just like what we do. It's not even a thing we worry about, it's just part of every step of what we do. Is planning on how we're going to have mentorship and education and training in the scope of work that we practice. So what I'm going to talk to you about this afternoon, just for a few more minutes, is what it's like to be a First Nation partnership and how we apply that to all the steps of our revegetation process. The revegetation process we've designed as a wheel. It's iterative, just like the circular thinking that Peter's talked about a few times this morning. And that's because your project might go around this wheel a few times. As your project changes, as conditions change, maybe your place burns down, just saying. And so what we're going to talk about is just going around the wheel a little bit about what it's like to be a First Nation partnership trying to do these sorts of processes. But before I do that, I'm going to talk about the circle outside the wheel, and that's that we're embedded in every step of what we do with engaging with our community. And it's a bit of a chicken and egg thing. Because we're a First Nation partnership, we got created through community engagement because the community got together and said, hey, we want to create a business that's a player actually in restoration, working with mining companies and industrial clients. So we're already sort of baked into having community engagement because we're part of it. It made us. We're living in it every day. But happily enough, we are also always touching base back to where we started. And that is done through working with our board members who have fielding calls from community members every single day, telling us whether or not we're about to go off the rails. And classic sort of air quotes community engagement, which is something that we still do about project-specific components of our work. So here's an example of some community engagement product that we have from a piece of work that we've completed for our work on the wheel in ecological landscape classification. You can see this is a relatively straightforward sticky note product, but the underpinning of it is important for us as a First Nation partnership, and that's that the First Nation knowledge holders that we have consulted in our community engagement are subject matter experts, and we value them and compensate them for their information. And in that compensation, we also we take what they've told us as actual like deliverables and data to integrate into the work that we do. That can be as simple as a GIS layer in the work that we do in ecological landscape classification, as I'm going to talk about because it's the first step on the wheel. But it's also maybe as complicated as rolling that into reclamation planning or any other components of the work as we go through the revegetation process. Whoops. So to get started around the wheel, again, how can you start in a place on the wheel? But I'm going to start here. And that's with site assessment and ecological landscape classification. That's a place that we do a lot of training. We have a lot of engagement with our community members because it's so connected to land. And it's a great place for us to have two-way communication with our community members and students because they can tell us about some of the Indigenous ways of knowing about the land that they are working on, and we can work with them to translate that into dovetailing with Western ways of knowing in kind of the way that information typically gets presented to somebody like a mining client. But we can, like I said, with the community engagement, we can add layers to that so that the data can inform land use planning priorities, and it can also inform places of focus for reclamation and prioritization of those things. Another place that we do a lot of education and community engagement in is seed collection and restoration planning. This is a thing that we do across Western Canada, and we're really pleased to be able to step outside the Yukon, although our Yukon is always our heart and our home. It supports a lot of work that's being done with First Nation communities where they're building businesses in seed collection and processing in partnership with native seed nurseries, providing a product to industrial clients that are looking for plants. So those are places where we, it's great because again, back to the two-way communication, we find out from our students about the plants in their area, and they've got the ways of knowing of keeping track of when the plants are coming into being in seed, when those seeds are in a good place to be collected. That's a bigger piece of work than you think about in kind of Western ways of knowing. You're like, yeah, it'll be fine, it'll be this week. But you really have to be in touch with the seasons and with how the summer's progressing to really know that, no, this is the time, and this is the time to act and collect seeds. And then go through the effort of actually collecting the seeds, which, by the way, takes a really long time and is really hard. Processing the seeds, again, with the long time and the really hard, and then testing them to see that they're actually a viable product that's worth selling to someone and making into plants to be used in your reclamation program. So there's a lot of steps to it, but it's super popular, and I'm really looking forward to the someday where we have a Yukon-based nursery that we can be working with First Nation communities to help them to collect seeds to feed into local nurseries. So we're Yukon Seed and Restoration. We do sometimes collect seeds. And we do that to stay connected to the land, sometimes to do that with just super cool projects. And when we're doing it with community members, we put them to work. So here in the bottom left slide, you can see somebody going through the onerous process of getting the seeds away from the fruit of the plant that we collected. And as Ethan in the corner over here can say, it's hard work. It takes a lot. We also work with our industrial clients to collect seeds to support developing a seed bank for eventual trials and reclamation projects. We did that at Casino, and I'm going to show you pictures of that tomorrow, and are hoping to do that with other clients because that's the beginning, and it takes a long time, so it's a great way to start. So just moving around the wheel, we also work on research and development, helping people to move their reclamation plan from their pretty 3-sentence paragraph of it'll be revegetated to what that really means. And that might include what kind of site prep you're going to have to create microtopography, what kind of plant species you're going to have, how you're going to place them, are you going to have fertilizer, all that stuff. It's actually pretty complicated and super cool, by the way. And it ties back into community engagement because if you and the community don't know what success looks like, then you don't know if you're going the same direction. And you might get to the end and be like, look, we fixed it, it's revegetated, it's restored. And they'd be like, no. So it's way better in this planning process to start early and have those conversations about what success looks like in a restoration plan so that everybody's pulling in the same direction and getting to the same place. So once we have a restoration plan, we can help you establish trials and create planting plans. Those are fabulous things to do, especially when it's really, really cold in the snow. Oh wait, I'm kidding there. But they are great ways to also bring community into creating trials and being in touch with the land and having that connectivity with the community, the land, and the company. So those are all awesome things. And we do small installation projects. Again, I kind of stole my own slide, but it's great to bring community members into places of disturbance and see the connection between them when they are part of a restoration project, even small ones, where they're actually making a difference in the land and making change in a good way. Those are really, really heartwarming things to do. Now, Yukon Seed and Restoration is small, at least at the moment. I've been dreaming big dreams this morning through the panels. I was like, okay, we could scale, but I'm trying to pace ourselves. But what we can also do is partner, and the partnerships are a key theme of this whole geoscience. So we can partner with folks who are a bit more established, like Wildside Restoration, to do larger installation projects, at least in this case, for example. So the last thing that we do going around the wheel, we're almost at the top of the circle again, is doing monitoring and adaptive management projects. It's fabulous to get out on the land and see if it's working. And really, you're just touching base with what's real. You're out of your office, you're seeing, is it still alive? Hooray! And all that stuff is really, really great, but it also encourages two-way conversations because you're working with the folks who are the environmental monitors who are out there day in and day out, and they've seen the pluses and the minuses and the fires on the hillside and the whole thing, and they can tell you a lot about the land and about the plan and whether they think this is going to work. And those are critical pieces of information and community engagement as First Nation partners that we're advocating for good things to be done on the land with your projects. So, what's the plan? YSR has been around since 2018. We've changed a lot. What we'd like to do as a First Nation partnership in continuing community engagement is to grow in a good way. We're trying to grow slowly, carefully, but also grow. While we're doing that, we're going to continue to advocate for using best practices in native plant restoration, and that includes using locally sourced native plants. You're not going to hear us tell you ever to go into Canadian Tire and buy grass seed, so just wipe that off your plate right there. Just don't do it. But it also is that we're going to be supporting you, we hope, in coming up with best practices in restoration planning, developing trials to make sure that it actually works, advocating for you to communicate with your community so that you all have success planned and you're going in the same direction. And once you've gotten there, you agree. You're like, we were successful, and everybody gets to have a little ribbon cutting ceremony, and high five and pictures, and the whole thing. And woven to all the pieces that we're going to do as we grow is we're going to have training integrated into all the steps. So hands-on training, supporting people who are just waking up maybe to their love of plants and helping to show them that there's a future here where you could be working in environmental aspects of mine development or other industrial development and be connected to the land and be connected to community. And so you don't maybe have to give it all up to do work in these areas. And those are key messages we're hoping to be able to share with you all and foster growth as we grow. So thank you very much for listening to me this afternoon. I appreciate it, and I have 4 minutes and 50 seconds if you have questions.